Come on, 2, 3.
Well, good morning. Welcome back to the Broadcast Retirement Network. I'm Jeff Snyder. This is BRN AM for Wednesday, December 14th, 2021. And our top story today, achieving those net zero climate pledges. Joining me now to discuss this and a lot more is Bob Colley. He's the principal and founder of Colley ESG. Bob, it's great to see you. Happy holidays. Thanks so much for joining us on the program this morning.
Happy holidays to you, Jeff. It's always a pleasure to talk to you.
And we're talking net zero emissions. Let's start off with exactly what this term means so that we're all level set, we're all on the same page. What does the term mean to you and to people within the industry?
It's a great question because, of course, we'll all use this phrase and assume that everyone knows what it means. But it's a good idea to go back and just look at, well, zero what is really the question. And the answer is it's zero greenhouse gas emissions, essentially, or primarily that's carbon dioxide. So the way that people tend to measure emissions now, there's different ways that you can do it. Most people now will just say, let's measure everything as if it's carbon dioxide. So that's the biggest thing that we emit every time you burn, every time you turn your car on, every time you turn on the heating, there's some carbon dioxide being emitting. So about 75% of the human emissions of greenhouse gases is carbon dioxide. And then there's other ones. Methane is a big deal. That's natural gas. We're all used to that. And then nitrous oxide and a few others. But the science behind that doesn't matter so much, as the point being, all of these gases, they get into the atmosphere and they're kind of this blanket around the earth, and it causes warming. So because we've been burning fossil fuels, it's been a wonderful thing for us to do in terms of saving energy and building the economy. The unfortunate side effect of that is we've been pumping out a lot of these greenhouse gases, and it's now reached a point where it's become a problem. And this is where the zero comes in. At the moment, the global economy is pumping out about 50 billion tons, so 50 gigatons of carbon dioxide and these other gases a year. And if we're going to stop global warming, if we're going to slow climate change down to a level that the scientists say we need to, we basically have to stop emitting that 50 billion tons. And we can't do that overnight. We need a plan for how do we get from here to there. Everywhere you look around us, we're seeing companies change. We're seeing vehicles being replaced by electric vehicles. We're seeing gas being replaced by other forms of heating. We're seeing solar. So all around us, we see the economy transitioning from very high emissions to low emissions, but we can't do it overnight. And so this net zero, that's the goal that everybody's shooting for.
All right, so thank you for that very concise and great description. I think I'm on the same page. Hopefully the audience is as well. So let's talk about how we get there. And last time we had you on, we talked about COP26, which is a regular annual event. This is probably a topic very high on the list there. But how do we, as individuals, and you live in the UK, I live in the US, there are people watching this from all over the world. How do we get from point A to point B, which is net zero?
Right. So this really kicked off. You were talking about COP26. If we go back about 5 or 6 years to COP21, so this was a meeting in Paris, we had the Paris Agreement. And that was really a big deal because there were 190 countries. So effectively, that's everybody. Unless you're North Korea, you were one of those 190 countries, signed up to a commitment that said, we have got to keep the increase in temperature from what it was 200 years ago. We really don't want to go more than 1.5 or possibly 2 degrees Celsius more than the temperature was then, because that just creates, bad stuff happens. And so that was the first kind of written commitment on the part of countries, 190 different countries, as I say. Now, fast forward from when that was signed about 5 or 6 years ago to today. And more than 100 of those countries have a stated policy goal of getting to net zero emissions, because that's really the only way that we're actually going to limit global temperature warming to that. So if you look at the US and if you look at China, so that's the two biggest emitters, they have these policy goals of net zero, and they're aiming to do that by about the year 2050, possibly 2060 in some cases. So a lot of countries have made this kind of general commitment. There's about a dozen or so, 12 countries have actually made it a law. So Sweden was first in 2017. They passed a law that said, we are going to be net zero by 2050. It's in law. The EU, the UK, where I am now, Japan, Canada. So big economies have made legal commitments to get to net zero. And that actually has quite a lot of implications, whether it's in law or whether it's just a policy goal as it is with the US. This doesn't happen by magic. It's not just a vague aspiration. You have to change how the economy works. So it affects, the food sector. How do we farm? How do we work agriculture? It affects construction. How do we make concrete? Obviously affects transport. And so without people necessarily kind of realizing what a big change is happening with the economy, we're going through an economic transition from being one type of economy to an economy which is largely going to rely on renewable energy, on different forms of transport, different forms of manufacturing. And it's going to take a few years to get there, but 2050, you don't get to net zero by 2050 unless you start to kind of turn the oil tanker now, unless you start to turn around now. So we're seeing all sorts of changes in how the economy is operating, because first of all, countries made this commitment to get to net zero. And then following on behind that, companies are starting to do the same thing, and investors are starting to do the same thing. And so it's working its way through the system. And so today, if you look at the largest companies in the world, you look at the stock market, most of the companies that you and I are investing in have made some sort of commitment to get to net zero emissions over the course of the next 20 or 30 years.
Well, Bob, that's a perfect segue, because in our next segment coming up, I want to talk to Bob about what this all means for investors, whether you're an individual investor, a retail investor, a pension fund, you name it. So you're going to want to stick around right here on BRN AM. Imagine a new television network that will make you richer, healthier, and in control of your financial future. This network is for the policewoman in Nashville, Tennessee, the baker in Dubuque, Iowa, the teacher in Lexington, Kentucky. We want to make the idea of savings and retirement culturally relevant. But what do you see as a defining issue of the midterms, especially for the smaller businesses? I mean, they are the lifeblood of the American economy. Featuring exclusive interviews, current affairs, and docuseries. 33 years old, you retired early.
The philosophy is money only matters if it helps you live a life that you love.
But you got to start thinking about retirement as soon as you get in.
The Broadcast Retirement Network will drive very high engagement with premium partnerships. So this isn't retirement and savings for your parents or grandparents. This is for all Americans. And we're going to change the way you think about money. Welcome to the next frontier of retirement and savings. This is BRN, the Broadcast Retirement Network.
Are you stuck with a low credit score? A credit report and score that's causing you to be denied credit or pay higher interest rates than others for the same things? Then do what Terrence did and call Credit Repaired for your free credit evaluation to help restore your credit.
I started thinking about buying a new house, and my score wasn't where I needed it to be. I called and spoke with one of the representatives, and we just had a good conversation, and I liked what he was saying.
Just one call for his free credit evaluation was all it took to start back on the track to repairing his credit.
I'm seeing the deletions and I'm getting the report, so I know something's being done. It does make a difference to me.
All it takes is one call to get started.
Credit repair has given me a second chance to have a better credit score.
Don't let a low credit score hold you back another day. Do what Terrence did and make the call for your free credit evaluation.
Call 800-819-4152. That's 800-819-4152. Again, 800-819-4152.
Welcome back. We're talking this morning to Bob Colley of Colley ESG. Bob, thanks so much for staying with us this morning.
It's good talking to you, Jeff. I like it.
Yeah, it's a lot of hot air, a lot of CO2 coming out of my mouth. I think I just raised it 1 degree Celsius. But in all seriousness, let's talk about, you broke it down, how we're going to get to point A to point B or Z. It's like steering a battleship. You don't just turn the corner on day one. You've got a lot of work that has to be done. Let's talk about some of the work that companies are doing. And you and I were talking offline, but I think I read something where McDonald's, Exxon, other big companies, public companies, are making some changes to how they do business in trying to follow these accords. What can you tell us?
It is. I was just before coming on and talking to you now, I thought I'd go out and just check what the current state of affairs is with companies. And looking down the list, there's one website, for example, will track all the largest companies in the world and say, well, how many of these have made some sort of commitment? And I was surprised because the number that haven't made a commitment by today is pretty small. There's a handful. And so if you look at most of the largest companies, and as you say, it's companies across every sector. So, people probably aren't surprised to hear that, say, Google, Google is interesting because it's not only made a commitment to be net zero, by its own calculations, it is net zero today already. But they're a technology company. They don't have a big distribution network. They don't have big factories and so on. So you could argue, well, you'd expect them to be in front of a lot of other companies because it is a little bit easier for them to get to net zero. But if you look, say, at Walmart or Amazon, they both have commitments to be net zero by 2040. And obviously they've both got a lot of distribution. So that's a lot of transport just in the way that they do business. And so it certainly takes some serious commitment on the part of either of those two companies to get to net zero. And in both cases, they've set that target of 2040. And you're not going to get to net zero by 2040 unless you start doing things now to change how you do business, to change the types of vehicles that you're using, to change the way that you're going about running your business. And so when you look through the whole economy, you're seeing that transition happening. And every company that, of course, when I change my practices, that has an effect on you. If you're either my customer or my supplier, has a knock-on effect to how you do business. And we're seeing this cascade through the whole economy. And the effects for an investor can be quite hard to kind of work out what the end effect is going to be, because you get this cascading effect. And so all investment firms at the moment really are trying to work out who are going to be the winners, because there will be winners, as well as who are going to be the losers from this transition that we're seeing going on.
So thanks for that, Bob. So if I'm an individual investor and I'm looking to contribute to my 401k, or if I'm in the UK and I contribute to Nest, or I have a pension, how do I see this change? I mean, a lot of people use mutual funds, collective investment trusts as vehicles. The average person like myself does that. We're not using very sophisticated investments, at least I don't. But how do we see that change, or do we see that change, or can we see that change?
Well, in the first instance, that change is happening anyway. So for example, I've said that the government's made this commitment, and then corporations are making this commitment. Asset management firms as well are stepping up and saying we need to invest in a way which supports net zero. Now, asset management firms are not going to invest in a way that's going to reduce their returns. That's too central to what they do, and they have fiduciary duty and so on to make sure that they're looking after clients' money. But within that constraint, there's still a lot of flexibility about where they choose to allocate money, or how they choose to interact with companies and so on. And so there's something called the Net Zero Asset Manager Alliance, and Vanguard BlackRock, State Street Global Advisors. So all of the big, they're the three biggest investment firms in the world. They've all signed up to a net zero investment approach. And as I say, they're not going to do that in ways that undermines their investment product because that's their business. But it does show that this cascading effect through the whole economy is happening. So there's a good chance that there are already changes within whoever you invest with, whether it's one of those big firms or whether it's one of the hundreds of other managers with perfectly good products available. A lot of them are making changes in their investment processes. And in some cases, they're making those changes because they want to use this as a way to win. They're saying if we see this transition going on around us, we can enhance our returns. So some of them will focus on the opportunities. Others may have more of a risk orientation and say, well, let's make sure that we avoid the losers. So as you know, different investment firms have different investment approaches. So the way that they're working these considerations into their investment processes, whether it differs from firm to firm. But so there's a good chance that this is already happening within your portfolio, whoever you're investing with. Now, there are also specialist firms and specialist products which really emphasize this element much more than the mainstream ones do. And so if for the people that want to kind of double down on getting to net zero, further products are available that are kind of more focused on that as well.
Yeah, Bob, when you meet with, so we thank you for that, and we talked about the individual investor. Let's talk about, I got about a minute and a half left. Let's talk about, which doesn't do justice, I know, but let's talk about those pension funds and endowments, those meetings that you sit in a lot of the times. This probably is, when you're thinking about your liabilities, your funding, all those things that go into managing a pension plan. Now you've got to think about returns, but you've also got to think about this commitment. I'm assuming you see pension funds also commit to this as well.
Yes, they are. And again, there's initiatives. I've mentioned the one for the asset managers. There are equivalent initiatives that affect the asset owners, the pension funds, and so on as well. A lot of them are committed. And there's a big difference here between a defined benefit scheme, a pension scheme, and a defined contribution scheme. As you know, with defined benefit, if I'm a member of a defined benefit plan, I'm getting a pension, so I know how much money I'm getting. So if the returns fluctuate, that's not necessarily going to affect what it costs me or the amount of income I get. In the defined contribution plan, a 401k, every extra little bit of return or every extra little bit of risk is directly affecting what's in my pocket. And so we're seeing the different types of pension savings vehicles reacting a little bit differently depending on whether they're defined benefit or defined contribution. But yeah, the asset owners, the pension funds are in on this game as well, for sure.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of complexity, obviously, that goes into managing those funds. Just got a little bit more complex, maybe not just a little, maybe a lot. Bob Colley, always great to talk to you. You make it so I can understand it. If I can understand it, geez, anyone can understand it. Great to see you. Happy holidays, and we look forward to having you back on the program again very soon.
Thanks, Jeff, and have a wonderful new year.
That wraps up this episode of BRN AM. Have a topic of interest, somebody you think we should talk to? Drop us a line, and don't forget, for all the information in lifestyle, wellness, finance, and tech, and a lot more, check out today's edition of our daily newsletter, The Morning Pulse. Want to search our content or see our latest shows? Check out our streaming partners, Roku, Amazon, and over 100 more. We're back again tomorrow. Until then, I'm Jeff Snyder. Stay safe, keep on saving, and don't forget, roll with the changes.
Waiting here for you to take and drink of. But if you're tired, come on.
Now is your opportunity to co-create content around any topic on the first lifestyle and wellness network. Reach a global audience through our platform and co-own exclusive branded content. All of our programs are available on demand and also as audio-only podcasts, so you can take us on the go. Broadcast Retirement Network, available anytime, anywhere, and on any device.
Are you being audited and do you owe the IRS $10,000 or more in back taxes? Is the IRS threatening to take more of your money? Don't fight the IRS alone. The Tax Doctor is here to help you negotiate your tax bill and reduce your stress. The IRS can freeze your assets and seize your bank accounts, but you can stop these IRS actions. The Tax Doctor will work with you using our years of experience to represent your case to help you get the best resolution under the IRS guidelines. Help is here to deal with the IRS to reduce your stress. We've handled thousands of cases, so we know what we're doing. If you owe $10,000 or more in back taxes, do not call the IRS alone. Call a Tax Doctor now for a tax emergency analysis.
Call 800-224-6439.